All right, hello YouTube. Welcome to the live stream for the first live stream of 2024. We're 20 days into 2024, and I am of course still constantly wanting to say and type 2023. The entire prep I did for this episode was typing 2023 for every date. So hopefully none of those slip through, but if there's anything that shows in the slideshow or anything that says 2023, except for a couple articles that we couldn't cover on the last episode because I didn't have time, there is a couple things I'm going to grab from 2023. But overall, it is 2024. Let's go ahead and hit the intro and get started into the episode proper.
The Dark Tower by Stephen King. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed.
Go then. There are other worlds than these.
Death, but not for you, gunslinger. It's time we had our own Palaver, I think, and it's going to take a while.
And yet, dauntless, the slug horn to my lips I set, and blew. Child Roland to the Dark Tower came.
We are content, one from many. Let the Palaver begin.
Hello and welcome to Dark Tower Palaver. This is our podcast covering Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower series, as well as we have, over the last couple of years, extended into the entire Stephen King universe because it is all under the tower, of course. So I am Tad, your host, and here for the first episode of 2024. It is unfortunately a week late. I guess I could address that up front. Originally, I was supposed to do it a week ago, so we are actually technically off schedule already. That's a great way to start the year. But I ended up getting sick last week with a pretty nasty cough, and I knew there was no way I was going to actually be able to podcast with that kind of cough. So this is technically an off week, so that means for the future, we are bi-weekly, of course, but that means next week we will be back for episode book club, not even a roundtable, so I don't know the number offhand. I think maybe it's part 6 for Wizard and Glass. That will be a week from today. So that is why I'm here a little bit late. I am recovered. I don't think I've coughed much due to the illness in the last couple days, so I am ready to dive into 2024 here. And then also for anyone that tried to listen in to Geekery Abides yesterday, I had some internet issues that has actually been plaguing me for almost a month now. I actually switched over to Google Fiber, and then they set me up, and probably a few hours later I was supposed to live stream that Geekery Abides show, and that went terribly. It looks like I'm going to be canceling Google Fiber less than 24 hours after signing up. Their speeds are dismal, definitely not fiber speeds. So unfortunately about that, so on that, that'll be our first episode of 2024 for Geekery Abides. Will only be a podcast because the live stream took a total shit, and unfortunately I didn't have the foresight to record as well as live stream. So sadly, that one will just be a podcast in the podcast feed. But going into the intro for this show, first of all, I want to warn you about spoilers. This is a roundtable, so all spoilers will come all over the place. So if you haven't finished the 7 primary books of the Dark Tower series, stick to our book club episodes. With those, we always stay where we're at or before. We never jump ahead, except for the very sliver end of the episode. We warn you in advance of getting into the spoiler section. We do talk about the section that we were covering and how it applies to the larger Dark Tower story, but we make sure that there's a audible warning, as well as if you're watching on YouTube, there will be a nice flashing screen that comes up and warns you that we are moving into spoiler territory, so there's no way to accidentally stumble into the spoiler section. But that is probably only 5% of the show, if even that. Sometimes there isn't as much to cover, so we end up not really talking spoilers at all. So those are the safest episodes if you haven't finished the series. I know over the years we've had a few people pop in and unfortunately not be finished reading, and we spoiled stuff for them. That is unfortunate. So that is your spoiler warning. If you want to find us, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can stream us on Spotify, find us on Amazon Music, Audible, or any podcasting service of your choice, as well as, and then if you want to subscribe, rate, and review on any of those services, we'd appreciate that. Then if you want to join the live streams, as we have a number of people already in the chat, Carol, Mark, we got someone new, maybe. Only Me 1909, Heil Dark Tower Junkies, Heil, and then as well as a few other people, it looks like, that may not be chatting so far, according to YouTube's numbers, if they are not lying, which of course we cannot ever assume. But if you want to join live like everyone is doing here, we live stream the shows here at Dark Tower, or youtube.com/Dark Tower Palaver. We do come live usually Saturday afternoons, every other week, every fortnight, as I like to say, because I love that term. I know there's a video game out there now that some people don't like, but no reason for a video game to ruin a wonderful word. So if you want to join live, you can join live here, be in the live chat, be part of the conversation real time. You can also watch all the live streams that we've done previous. If you can't catch us live, that's totally fine too. I think since we started going live, we've kept all of them up there. I do think YouTube has screwed up and deleted a couple over the years that we've been doing this. So if there's any missing, unfortunately, there's no way to get those back. YouTube is a vicious beast sometimes. And then if you are here on YouTube, if you want to like the video, that always helps out the YouTube algorithms. I always, whenever I hear people talk about the YouTube algorithms or any algorithms, I always picture, ancient people sacrificing people to the sun gods and stuff. That's the way it feels like with algorithms sometimes. But then if you also want to subscribe, that's awesome. You'll get you'll be notified when we're going live and stuff. If you ring the bell for notifications, especially, you'll get notifications. For instance, last week when I had to delay the episode a week because I was sick, that's where you'll get those notifications, as well as I usually try to do stuff on social media, as well as YouTube has an option to post text things. I'll try to post updates there whenever I need to. If there is things that have to move around, having the notifications is a great way to be informed. And then if you want to find the show notes or all things Dark Tower Palaver, it's over at darkttowerpalaver.com. That is the hub. That is the spoke of the hub at the center of the wheel of Dark Tower Palaver. We have links to all of our stuff over there, and as well as the show notes, everything we cover here today. If I'm going to recap things or whatever, if you want to read the full articles or any of that kind of stuff, you can do it over there. As well as we have the questions for new listeners. If you are a new listener, we welcome you to our extended quartet. And of course, if you've read the books, you know one of the best ways for a new quartet member to join is for them to tell their story. And we've come up with these questions over the years that is a way for us to get to know you as a Dark Tower fan, as a Stephen King fan. You can answer one of those questions. You can answer all of them. You can answer anything in between. It's more of just a primer to help someone with maybe an introductory email. And that is the best way to introduce yourself, is email. But of course, if you're here live in a live stream, you can do that too. It's probably harder to answer those questions in here. Then if you want to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/darktowerpalaver. Unfortunately, because of the internet issues, as well as sickness, there was multiple things happening. The Patreon, we do monthly hangouts. Yesterday I was supposed to do one yesterday. I usually try to plan it with the first episode, but that is literally the time that Google was coming to install, so I was unable to do that. So it will be with next week's episode for sure. I will make sure to be consistent with that, as well as you'll get access to our Patreon server, or our Discord server, where you can chat with us. I know Peter's even still on there. If you want to chat during the course of the week, that's always a fun thing as well. As well as I do know there's one of the highest benefit tier allows you to come on and join the show and co-host for an episode. So there's a couple benefits there. Then if you want to contact the show, you can do that a number of ways I've already mentioned. show at darkttowerpalaver.com is our email. If you want to send an email there, of course, that is the mailbag. It is actually empty right now. I have got a couple emails in about our March Insanity fan vote. I will get to that later. But in terms of letting you know, but if you have sent those emails in for those, I did get those, but those aren't necessarily ones to read on the show. Then if you want to find us on social media, facebook.com/darktowerpalaver or at Dark Tower Pod on Twitter, because Twitter's character limits, at least at the time we signed up, would not allow Palaver along with Dark Tower. It was too long, so we had to go Dark Tower Pod. And then Instagram at Dark Tower Palaver. That is all of our social media and how you can engage with us between shows and all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry. Yeah, Bart is only me 1909. Okay, Bart, awesome. If unfortunately that's one of the things with Peter having to step out for a while is he was the one that generally had notes on who was who when we couldn't decode the names. But I will try to remember that. But welcome, Bart. Good to see you. All right, so that is the intro stuff. I've already mentioned that the next episode will be a week from now, and then that is pretty much it for the intro. Let's go ahead and dive right in to 2024. First of all, let's go ahead and dive in to some news here. The first one, of course, the big one, if you've been on the internet for Dark Tower especially, this kind of caused some waves over the last week, not even a week, maybe a week. And this is Carla Gugino was doing an interview, and she basically talked about, the headline of the article is Talks Mike Flanagan's horror series, her career, and her first Critics' Choice nomination, which is well-deserved. Any award she wins for her role in The Fall of the House of Usher is well-deserved. She did an incredible job. But this is by Mike D'Angelo from The Playlist on January 12th, 2024. And Carla, much like if you were with us back in the day as we were leading into the movie in 2017, we had a number of times where, there'd be an interview with someone, and then at the very end of the interview, they'd sneak in a question about the Dark Tower. It's kind of seeming like that's coming back now because this was toward the end of the interview. Carla was doing an interview with The Playlist and talking about various things, including her, award-winning performance, House of Usher. And then the conversation turned to Flanagan's Dark Tower. And she said, quote, there has been a conversation about the Dark Tower, but I don't have any intel I could share other than that, Gugino teased. I do hope that it all comes together, and I know that's something that he's incredibly passionate about, of course, talking about Mike Flanagan. I do think I do think he is great, just as a Stephen King interpreter, and yet he also has a strong voice of his own that is somehow beautiful, Gerald's Game is so true to the book, even to the point where the end, which I think is actually imperative, was part of it that people really responded to or didn't. And Mike was so clear about it, quote, and then she's quoting Mike here. That's what it is, though. And yet I thought he did it so seamlessly. So basically saying that even on Gerald's Game, which of course she was involved in, he was very true to King's actual vision of the story. So kind of an interesting little thing for her to say, that the conversation has been had. I believe, if I remember right, in the last couple episodes we covered oh God, I just blanked on his name. Of course this is happening to me. Elliot from E.T., Henry Thomas. I believe we covered Henry Thomas also saying something about having discussed this with Mike Flanagan as well. Of course, this is no surprise that Flanagan has probably been talking to a lot of his regulars. But it is interesting because we can start kind of ticking off a list and seeing who openly says that they've been talked to about it, because of course not every Flanagan regular is going to show up. So up to this point we've got Henry Thomas and we've got Carla Gugino that have openly mentioned discussions about the Dark Tower series with Mike Flanagan. And Heil Allen, welcome. And Carol says, I miss Peter. Glad to still have Tad, though. Yeah, I definitely miss him, too. I actually do have an update from Peter. I'll have that in the Palaver section. I believe he was listening to the year-end bash and decided to send something in. So I do have something at the end of the episode here, or in the Palaver section toward the end of the episode. So stay tuned for a little update from Peter. And then also, along with this article, I also wanted to supplement this with a interview that Carla did with Cinema Blend. First, she talks about Flanagan, the Flanagan family of actors, which I thought was an interesting quote. It isn't necessarily fully pertinent to the Dark Tower series, but I thought it was very interesting. Of course, if Mike is going to be doing the Dark Tower series, how he and his cast get along and work together is imperative to the Dark Tower. So I want to cover this one first, and we'll get into what she says to Cinema Blend about the Dark Tower series. She says, Mike was talking about how this show and this ensemble, which I think she's talking Fall of the House of Usher, when we were on set one day, he was saying that all of the notes are like a symphony. And he was saying that it's interesting because Verna is like her own symphony, which is her character in the House of Usher. But that again, I think that was key with the whole with this kind of character. It's still very much needed to play in the same symphony as everyone else, and yet the role required its own sort of soundtrack, so to speak. So it was really fun and interesting, challenging in a way, because I think that there's not a single actor in the ensemble cast that isn't absolutely fearless. So that's kind of cool. Definitely kind of an interesting way to think about it is, a Flanagan, and probably any film or television adaptation being like a symphony, and you've got all these different instruments and notes trying to work together to one ultimate thing. And I do definitely think with someone like Mike that has such a cast of characters, which I think I am going to pull from this article and say the Flanagan Family. I think I'm going to start calling the group that, the Flanagan Regulars. I think Flanagan Family has a good ring to it there. Yeah, that's a cool quote. And then they then point out that you can likely count on Gugino to say yes pretty much anytime Flanagan asks. The interviewer then asks her if she has picked up copies of the Dark Tower in preparation, and she laughed and said, "Indeed, indeed." So, if she is not just being polite, it sounds like Carla has purchased some copies of the Dark Tower series to start reading for preparation. So again, very, very interesting to go along with the fact that she had already admitted in that previous interview with the other publication that she's talked to Mike about the Dark Tower series. Now she's basically telling Cinema Blend that she has indeed purchased copies of the Dark Tower to read through. So that is really exciting and really cool. Let's see. And Alan saying hit that like button. Thank you, Alan. Indeed. I guess I'm still not good at that with the YouTube side. I usually say it in the intro and then forget otherwise. I don't know if I can do it or not. I don't know if it counts. Probably not for me. I know when Peter was in here, he counted as a listener technically because he was just tuning in like you guys, just sitting next to me. And I think he was able to push the heart button, the like button, whatever. So, and then also the interviewer then I believe jokingly said that they should cast her as Roland. And she said, "Bring it, I am ready." So I do believe that's all in humor. But that's funny. I mean, honestly, Carla's pretty badass. She could probably pull a Roland off if it really came down to that. Although I will say, the picture I have on the screen here, if you're watching on the YouTube side or you're here on the live stream, this, honest to God, the look that Carla has here is damn near what I've always pictured Aunt Cord from Wizard and Glass, which we're just about to meet for the first time in the book club. I believe next week we might meet her, if not very soon after. But honestly, it's not necessarily that I had Carla in mind, but just kind of this sinister smile that she's got here, as well as just the overall look that she has, age-wise, haircut-wise. This is literally how I've always pictured Aunt Cord, long before I've even thought about her necessarily being on screen. That's just how she came to be in my mind. Not exactly Carla's face, but this is so damn close to what I've always pictured as Cordelia Delgado, our second most hated character in the Dark Tower universe, according to the March Insanity from 2019, I think it was. I can't remember. I think that was the year that we did it that was the most hated. Of course, Rhea of the Coups won, but Cordelia ended up in the 2 spot, facing off with Rhea in the finals. That's a lot of fun. And then diving into the next article, it actually goes kind of along with this. It's actually also from Cinema Blend, but this is actually a different writer. The first Cinema Blend writer, I'm blanking on his name. I should have taken it down. But this one is Eric Eisenberg. We've covered his stuff in the past. He's a big Stephen King fan. He's also from Cinema Blend, but this is a different writer than the last one, just for that, make sure there's no confusion. And this came from Cinema Blend on January 11th, 2024. So the article's preface mentions that we have no timeline for Flanagan's Dark Tower series right now. He's got the rights. He acquired the rights in December of 2022. And aside from some bits of what his vision is that have been given to us in that intervening time, and some optimism that he gave us in the summer of 23 during the strikes. Outside of all that, we've basically heard very little about anything with the Dark Tower series. We don't know much, so it could be, it could be a long haul. Who knows? But for right now, we have precious little to go off of. He does also mention that, of course, Mike is hard at work, probably on Life of Chuck. They've wrapped filming on that, but they are certainly doing post-production on it. So I wouldn't imagine until Life of Chuck is completely wrapped, including post-production, I wouldn't imagine that we would probably get a whole lot of announcements for the Dark Tower series, because Mike would not be able to work on it as heavily as it probably requires until Life of Chuck is more I don't want to say in the can, because it is in the can. Filming is done, but post-production, editing, music, all that stuff that makes a movie, all that stuff still needs to be done. So of course that will be taking up a lot of Mike's time. So Eric mentions in the Cinema Blend article, he mentions the Cinema Blend article that I referenced previously with the interview with Carla Gugino, and he talks about the quote about the Dark Tower series and the joking question about her playing Roland, and that got him thinking, where would some of Flanagan's regulars, or as I now want to coin it as Flanagan Family, where they would fit into the Dark Tower series. He did mention that Flanagan has preached patience, and it might be a few years before we see anything come of this series. So I do think he's kind of talking that, because there is a couple things in here that he picks out that might surprise people. And I do think knowing that it's probably a few years in the future might be critical to seeing his vision on some of these Dreamcasts here. So I also wanted to note, Peter and I have done Dreamcastings with Flanagan regulars twice. The first one was not long after the announcement of Mike having gained the rights, so it probably would have been the first quarter of last year, I believe, because he got the rights in late 2022, and I can't remember if we got the announcement right at the end of the year or if it was the very beginning of 2023. Either way, though, we would have done probably a Flanagan Dreamcasting sometime early last year, and then also right after the fall of the House of Usher, and seeing that, we did another Dreamcasting in light of the fall of the House of Usher, with the Flanagan, not necessarily all Flanagan regulars, but how it would be Dreamcast, understanding that Flanagan's doing it, and the Flanagan family would likely show up in the series throughout, probably. So, I don't think either time, though, we really approached it as only Flanagan Family folks, as Eric is doing here. So now going to his picks, which are very interesting. He only picks a couple of the characters here, but the actors that he picks are interesting, and his reasoning is pretty sound, I think, on most of them. The first one, I don't think it's even a new one that we've necessarily haven't heard before. In fact, I believe that maybe some of you guys that have sent stuff in with some of our Dreamcastings may have actually picked this one as well. I'm certainly not down on it, but he has Roland Deschain being played by Bruce Greenwood, which of course was in Gerald's Game, Dr. Sleep, The Fall of the House of Usher. Of course, Bruce has been in a lot of things, but those are the Flanagan's things that he's been in. And then his explanation is, he says, "I've said it before and I'll repeat it as many times as necessary. Roland Deschain should not be played by an actor younger than 50. He says, putting aside the fact that he starts developing crippling arthritis and Wolves of the Kala, Roland is written as having lived a long, rough life with decades of pain and loss, turning him into a hard case that he is when we first meet him in The Gunslinger. And he says in parentheses, he shouldn't just be 10 to 15 years removed from his time with Susan, for example. And he goes on and says Bruce Greenwood is a fit in that regard, but far more important is that he can provide the weathered gruffness that the role requires, as well as the warmth he develops as he grows closer with his quartet. I don't know what y'all think, but me, honestly, I do not hate that casting. I totally see his vision. I do know that I've generally thought in my head that Roland is probably not one you want to go younger with, like super young, but I do think he could pretty much be anywhere from the ages of like 3 to probably close to 60. You could probably cast Roland anywhere in that realm. It sounds like Eric's opinion is you wouldn't want to go younger. I don't necessarily disagree, but I can't say that I fully agree. I've definitely had different castings over the years. I don't remember who my last one was after the fall of the House of Usher, but Yeah, but Bruce is not a bad pick at all. That's definitely a good one. He's a great actor, and I think he could pull off a really good Roland for sure. And then in the chat too, if you guys agree, disagree, you can definitely chime in as well, or throw out your castings as well if you want to be part of the conversation here. Now the next one is the is the interesting one, probably the one that, well, I wouldn't say the one that made me scratch my head the most, but it is definitely one that made me kind of like pause and had to kind of take in a little bit, because it is kind of surprising. Let's see. Alan says the image in the background is the same cover I had when I read it once, and I always saw Roland as a mix between Viggo Mortensen with the Clint Eastwood and Stephen King. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different ways you can take him. I think at different points, like you think 100%, you think Clint Eastwood. I think later on in the story, there's a time when it's referencing King, and I think it says something along the lines that Roland doesn't look all that different from Stephen King. So I think that kind of makes you put it in your head where maybe he has some Stephen King mixed in there as well as Alan. Viggo Mortensen is definitely one that over the years has been a very popular pick. Of course, when this initially was really heated up in terms of potentially having a Dark Tower movie was way back in the early 2000s. Of course, developmental hell took us about a decade. But I do think that, right off the heels of Lord of the Rings, Viggo Mortensen was a very trendy pick for Roland. I remember back in the days of Internet Movie Database message boards, when they used to have message boards on all the different movies and television shows, as well as upcoming ones. And I remember there was the little board there for the Dark Tower movie. At the time, I think it was J.J. Abrams was supposed to be the one in charge. And I do remember Viggo was probably far and away the most popular pick. Again, I do think part of that comes down to the fact that you're literally a few years removed from the Lord of the Rings. He's basically as popular as he's ever been. Of course, he's a talented actor, but I don't think anyone can argue that he was at his most popular during Lord of the Rings. So that's not an unpopular one. In fact, I actually did not like that casting for the longest time just because it was so popular. I do think now, though, as time has gone by, and he isn't necessarily as trendy of a pick and as overtly popular as he was in 2005 or whatever, I actually think I'm more friendly to the idea of Viggo Mortensen casting if that were what somebody wanted to pick. I know that's not what you're saying, Alan, but if somebody did say that, I wouldn't necessarily be as against it now as I was in, say, 2005, 2006 on those message boards. I used to fight hard against the Viggo Mortensen pick because it just felt way too trendy for me. But that tangent aside, getting into the second one, which I do appreciate that Eric here has picked Randall Flagg as number 2. And Randall Flagg, here's probably I'm not going to say the most interesting one, but very interesting one. He has Randall Flagg as Carla Gugino. So that is a very interesting pick. Of course, Gerald's Game. So he lists all the Mike Flanagan stuff. So Carla, of course, has been in Gerald's Game, Haunting a Hill House, the Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, The Fall of the House of Usher, damn near everything. Yeah, this is a very interesting one, especially if we were to go back to the picture from the previous article. I mean, Carla is definitely has, and especially what we saw in Usher, which was what he's going to get to in a second. What she did in The Fall of House of Usher is very Flagg-esque and feels like maybe she could fit that role. But he says, well, I don't totally dismiss the thought of Carla as playing Roland. The reality is I would much rather see her play the villainous Randall Flagg, which I don't like that term villainous. I think that's a little unkind and unfair to our beloved Randall Flagg. And then he goes on and says, and not just because it's a lot easier to change the character's gender. Her turn as Verna in The Fall of the House of Usher felt like a test run for her as a magical, sinister agent of darkness. So why not let her sprint as the principal antagonist in the Dark Tower series? Plus, he says it would be amazing to witness a dynamic flip from Gerald's Game with her and Bruce Greenwood. So not only just looking at it from the perspective of, just the fact that she's a brilliant actor and what she did in The Fall of House of Usher, but also that is a very interesting thought process is, Bruce Greenwood and her had a very interesting dynamic in Gerald's Game. This would flip it on its head and you would have it kind of going in the opposite direction. So very, very interesting pick by Eric there. One I've never considered before, but one that I am not entirely gonna say no to. I think Carla is brilliant, and Flag is a man of many faces. Well, a creature of many faces. If Peter were here, that's probably what he would say is creature. But yeah, I would not, as a huge Randall Flagg fan, it is not necessarily a dream casting that I would disagree with. It would definitely be one that a lot of people I think would maybe have a problem with, but I personally do not. I would not have that problem. Agamorphy says, I would be all for Carla as the Man in Black if she hadn't already been Verna and Usher. It feels like typecasting, not a creative move. I could kind of see that, but I do think that just, I don't know. I guess like it's almost like, I don't know if it's I guess for me, I don't see it as typecasting just because of all the other stuff that she's done with Flanagan, and she's been a varying different degree of things in all the different projects. But I do think that that is the most Flagg-esque role that she's played. So it probably has me convinced. Like, let's just say this was a month before The Fall of the House of Usher was to come out. None of us really knew who all these characters exactly were going to be. If you would have told me then you wanted Carla as Randall Flagg, I probably would have said no. Not necessarily because I'm like, against like gender swapping or anything like that, but it just wouldn't. I just don't know if I would have necessarily felt it. Like she did great in all these things like Gerald's Game, the Haunting of Hill House and stuff, but none of those really feel like Flagg to me. Like, and I guess it would be hard for me to imagine, can she play a Flagg-like role? But now on the heels of The Fall of House of Usher, though, I do think that she has basically played a role that is so in the vein of what Flagg could be. I could kind of see it now. So I definitely, Agamorphy, not to say you're wrong. We all definitely have our opinions for sure. But I guess for me, I wouldn't see it as that. In fact, I would have been probably against it until seeing The Fall of the House of Usher. But now I'd be a little bit more convinced that she could pull it off maybe. So I don't know. I would be interested too, because I think Peter and I talked about this when we did our last dream casting after The Fall of the House of Usher. Is the problem is that a number of these Flanagan family people are female, and there is just not a lot of female roles in the Dark Tower series, especially early on. I mean, it's not even just that. I mean, there's even what we talked about. I think it was Henry Thomas we were talking about, where it's like there's a number of roles for him, but some of those roles wouldn't show up until 4 or 5 seasons in. When you get into the Kala or some of these later areas, like the Dark Tower is just very. I wouldn't say it's lacking characters, but I would say there's a lot of characters in the first half of the story, maybe up until you get to the flashback stuff in Wizard and Glass. I would say a lot of the roles you have are very, very small roles, small actors that could pop in, do a couple, an episode or two, and then they'd be gone. I think of like Winston in Lud, or Aunt Talitha. There's like Brown in the first book. There's all these characters that are just very small and minor, and I just don't know. Do you spend a Flanagan family member on a role like that? A role like Allie in Tull. It's a big character for that small portion of it, but in the larger context, there's very few characters that really drag throughout the whole thing. So when you start looking at some of these Flanagan family members, it is really hard to find roles for everyone, because it's just, I mean, and again, I at first I said female, but I'm going to take a step back on that and say, including males, there's a lot of characters, a lot of these actors, I just don't know where they fit, or if they do fit, they don't fit till much later in the story, and it's just strange to imagine a Flanagan thing without some of the family members showing up until, again, 3-4 seasons into a 5-season run or whatever. So very interesting. Carol says, good point, Tad. He will have to bring back some of the men from the past shows like Midnight Mass. Yeah, there's all kind. There's, and I'm blanking on it, but the dude that has the dog that gets poisoned at Midnight Mass, he's been in a number of Flanagan things. I think he's almost. The problem is he usually plays smaller characters, not necessarily lead, like big characters have massive roles, but he'll play smaller roles. But like even him, I remember thinking where it's like, God, he's such a great actor, but I just couldn't think of a good spot to put him when I was casting it with Peter, whatever it was, probably 3-4 months ago. So yeah, I can, it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. I do think though that maybe some of these Flanagan family folks will get small little roles, pop in for a bit and then be gone. Things like Andrew Quick. I mean, there's I'm trying to think of some of the other characters that might have big moments, that could be a couple episodes, but then they would just be gone after that. So it'd be interesting. As well as, I mean, even Randall Flagg, if you were to do Carla or whoever you did for Randall Flagg, Randall is not in the books that much, and I kind of wonder if Flanagan ups the amount of Flagg a little bit, which I'm never going to argue is a bad thing, to give us more of him so that there's a little bit more. I don't think you have to go hardcore to where it completely changes the story, but I just wonder if Flagg shows up a little bit more so that you kind of have this antagonist that doesn't just vanish for massive swaths of time and then just reappears randomly. I wonder if you might see him pop up a little bit more, and maybe give a little bit more meat to the actor that will play him. Next up, and this is one that really hit me in an interesting way, and I thought it was funny because we've seen this actor cast in a different role a number of times, and I think everyone's first reaction to this once I read it is going to be like, no way, but then listen to his description because it won't sound as crazy. He has Eddie Dean, and then for Eddie Dean he has Jacob Tremblay, which was in Before I Wake, Dr. Sleep, and The Life of Chuck, the upcoming Life of Chuck. So Jacob Tremblay, of course, we all know Baseball Boy from Dr. Sleep is probably his most famous. I think my first reaction is like, are you fucking kidding me? You're going to cast like a 15-year-old as Eddie Dean. But again, I think that Jacob, especially with COVID and everything that happened, he's a kid in some of the stuff. Like he was in Room originally with Brie Larson. Then even in Dr. Sleep, he was younger. The thing is that Dr. Sleep was filmed 6 years ago now. So I think we just haven't seen Jacob in as many things in the last year or so. So I think a lot of us still have it in our mind that he's a very young kid, but he really isn't. And his explanation for this, he goes on and says, Eric says, Jacob Tremblay will only be turning 18 in 2024, so that's this year he turns 18, which does make it a tad bit young for a role like Eddie Dean, but time is on his side for the reasons mentioned above. Again, that we may be in for the long haul for this series. It's very unlikely that we're going to be getting an announcement and they're going to start filming sometime in this calendar year. That's probably not in the cards, the way things are looking. So, if that is the case, if this is a couple years from now, yes, he still might be a couple years younger than Eddie is in the book, which is around 23, I think, 22, 23. But he's going to be right in the right ballpark if this series is out a couple years from now. So, and then he goes on and says, I also recognize that Eddie's attitude is not exactly Tremblay's brand. Audiences have come to love him as a wide-eyed Angino, funny little word to say for naive, simple boy, in movies like Room, Wonder, Good Boys, and Dr. Sleep. But this is me casting a vote of confidence in his abilities. He's repeatedly proven himself as a talented child actor, but as he matures into being an adult performer, that means taking on more mature roles, and between the character's struggles with addiction and blossoming love for Susanna, Eddie would be exactly that. And I do kind of like this. I think if this were 20 years ago, I don't think I would buy this as much, but in the intervening I would say maybe this century, since the turn of this, which is 24 years now, there was kind of those teenage heartthrob types like Leonardo DiCaprio, as well as Zac Efron now, more recently. And I think they're like these teenage heartthrobs that a lot of us, especially men, will like reactively be, oh, whatever, they're just a pretty face, they're not talented. And then later on, they start to play these more dramatic roles and take on some incredible roles, work with incredible directors. And as they evolve into men from being kind of like boys, they end up turning out to be fucking incredible actors. And so if I didn't have the experience of Zac Efron and Leonardo DiCaprio, I would probably be kind of poo-pooing this a little bit. But honestly, we've just seen some of these young actors that have kind of turned into mature adult actors in an incredible way. Whereas back in the day, that didn't necessarily happen a lot. A lot of child actors that was their whole career. Of course, you have someone like Ron Howard that's kind of the rule, the exception that proves the rule. But I think nowadays, as well as actors, these young actors that are child actors today are far more well-trained and professional. I remember there's always the story of, God damn it, I almost said Tim Curry. God damn it. Pennywise from the new one. I'm blanking. Oh man. I got some brain fog. What is that? Pennywise new. Billy Skarsgård. Bill Skarsgård. He had a story where he talked about doing a scene. I think it was in the Niebolt house. And he like did some pretty crazy acting and stuff. Thank you, Alan. I know there's a delay here, so I got it before you got me, but I think you probably sent it while I was still struggling with it there. Bill Skarsgård. He told the story of doing the Niebolt Street house. He kind of goes crazy. There's the scene where he kind of goes at the kids and stuff, and he was kind of worried, after as they, called cut and stuff. He's like, you guys, how are you guys doing and stuff? And one of the kids, I think it was the one that played Eddie, was like, oh man, I love what you're doing. And then he starts like, he's so like clinical about it and such a professional that it's not like, oh, I just scared these poor children. I know they're actors, but all throughout history of film, you always have this element of like, yes, a child actor, though they're still a child. You've got to be careful that they don't get traumatized or whatever. But he was just kind of taken aback because like these kids were they acted so adult, even though they were children. They were approaching it as such a craft that, I just think there's a talent level with child actors that we didn't necessarily see 30, 40, 50 years ago, because I think nowadays child actors aren't just being thrown into the acting game. I think they're being put through, acting classes, and they're learning their craft, kind of what adults did in the old days and still do today, but now kids are doing that from a young age, so they're way more talented. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting casting, and my first knee-jerk reaction I read that was like, he's fucking crazy. The kid's like 15. And then his first line saying that he turns 18 this year, it's like, okay, so maybe he's not as young as I am remembering. I guess the problem is I guess we'll see him in Life of Chuck, though, because that film last year, so that will be him at 17 or so. So it'll be interesting to see that and kind of see how he looks like, how is he maturing in terms of visually, because of course teenagers films often struggle with the fact that teenagers, especially going through puberty, tend to change. They'll sprout up really tall, or they'll just start to get a little bit more of a mature look, or their voices will change, and it really wreaks havoc on film production when they try to keep all this stuff in line when they're filming over the course of 6 months. For a child, that can be a lot of growth. So it'll be interesting to see what he looks like now at 17 when Life of Chuck comes out, hopefully later this year. I don't know if we have any announcements on that yet, because it is in an independent movie that needs to be sold to a studio and then get a wide release. But I'm kind of crossing my fingers, maybe it'll be this year, if not early next year. And then another surprising one. Let's see. And then Agamorphy says, yeah, love Jacob Tremblay. He has aged significantly. And I think that's the real thing. I didn't actually do it while I was doing prep, but what I probably should have done is just Googled, like, in the last couple weeks, like with the not Grammys, the Golden Globes and some of these the Emmys and stuff. Like, I should have Googled to see if he was actually at any of those shows, like, and see if there's any red carpet stuff, because that would have been like, couple week old pictures of him. It would be interesting to see kind of where he's at right now, because for me, I'm still imagining like, kid that looks like he's 12 to 15 and Baseball Boy or the movie Room or whatever. So yeah, that'll be interesting. So then going on, he has next up Odetta Holmes, Detta Walker, Susanna Dean. This is an interesting one. He's got Kylie Curran from Dr. Sleep in The Fall of the House of Usher. He says Kylie Curran was a revelation as Abra Stone in Dr. Sleep, and was wonderful as Lenore in The Fall of the House of Usher. The innocent and good heart of The Fall of the House of Usher, and she has shown that she is talented enough to take on. She has shown that she is talented enough to take on a role like Odetta Holmes, Detta Walker, Susanna Dean. Between the character not having any legs and her multiple personalities, it is an advanced and complicated part. But like Tremblay playing Eddie, this could it could be a perfect testing of Curran's skill and the mature role that helps define her career as an adult actor. So yeah, this is another one that kind of surprised me, because again, I don't know that I've necessarily seen her since Dr. Sleep, which again was 2019. So that would have been, or they probably filmed it in 2018. So that's probably 5 years ago now. So she's probably aged up enough. I don't know. Let's see, looking at Google right now, she's born in 2015. So yeah, she's 18 years old as of right now, if Google is not lying to me. So yeah, again, if you age her up a couple years, that is a little bit younger than Susanna is, but I don't really think that Susanna's age is as critical, because I think like Eddie, you need to have like kind of a younger a younger 20s guy, because what kind of guy is going to get tied up in like drug smuggling from a Caribbean island on an airliner? That feels like someone kind of in their younger 20s, maybe, that's being led astray by a shitty brother. Whereas like Susanna, a lot of the stuff that we deal with her, I don't think that any of those things are as age dependent. So I love this choice as well, because honestly, yes, like he says, the big revelation with her was Abra Stone. I didn't necessarily hate Abra in the book, but I don't think I really loved her as much either. But Kylie's role as Abra in the movie really knocked my socks off, and I am I absolutely adore the character of Abra, and a large part of that is Kylie's performance. Not that King wrote her badly, it's just I didn't connect with her as well, and I think that Kylie brought her to life in a way that just kind of, I don't know, put her on the map for me in terms of like she elevated quite highly. I remember a few years ago when Peter and I did like our top 10 King kids. I believe Kylie even made that list, and I do not think that if Dr. Sleep was just a book, I don't think she would have even made it in my rough cut of like my shotgun list, because again, not that she was a bad character. It just, I don't know, Kylie really brought some life to her in a massive way for me. So with as good as she did there, I would absolutely adore seeing her in this, and giving her a role like Susanna would be a massive chance for her, you know, as an actor as well, to really step in a role like this. Is probably be one of the most difficult roles in this story, between the multiple personalities and the not having legs is going to be interesting special effects wise. So yeah, that's an interesting pick. Carol says agreed, she's a good fit. Agamorph says no, too young. Susanna needs to be an actor with grit, older than her years. And I think that's where the acting comes from. If it come when you, like what you're saying there, when you say older than her years, I think that is something that could technically apply to a younger person. It then behooves the actor to step into that and make the person appear older than they actually are, and you know, live up to the trauma that she's been through. You know, obviously we all know the stuff from her backstory, be it the break or the train, or you know, the jail cell. I mean, there's a number of things, the marches. There's all kinds of things that she's dealt with. She would definitely be well aged beyond her maturity. But the thing is, it's always interesting for me, and I think it's Chris from Australia has called me on it a couple times over the years, because I don't know where, but I somewhere got in my mind that Susanna was more in like the mid to late 30s, and I was absolutely wrong. And Chris from Australia, I think, was the one that called me out on it, where he, you know, gave me the place to go look, where it mentions I think she is only in her upper 20s, so there's not that much of an age difference between her and Eddie. But for some reason, when I read the stories, it always just kind of it went in my mind, probably because what Agamorphy's mentioning, kind of her maturity that's almost beyond her years. She just kind of almost appear, and maybe it is also the fact that she's from a different era too, the fact that she's from the 60s, a time that would have been a little bit more about proper, you know, speech and etiquette, and just the way she acts is just, it feels older, because she's from an older time period, and if you know, and that makes someone appear older. You know, it's hard to exactly put into words, but it's kind of like if someone's name was like Agnes, right? Like chances are someone named Agnes wasn't born in 1995. She's probably born in 1915 or something. Like, and I know a name is different than mannerisms and manners and being well spoken and well educated. In that era, well educated would come off differently than maybe well educated would like come off today. And I think because of that's just always aged her up in my mind. So I'm always fighting against the idea whenever we talk about Odetta, and specifically her age. I always have to fight against my natural reaction that's just ingrained in me for some reason, to imagine that she's around 40, which is almost double Eddie's age, and when she absolutely is not. So and then Carol says we have to make allowances / room for all the aging that happens over the seasons, and that's true too. You know, that's of course the last one that we have to talk about is Jake Chambers, which is probably going to be the one that we have to deal with the most when we come to that. My theory is what we need to do is just, I know the course of the Dark Tower series only takes like somewhere under a year in terms of true timeline in the books, although time does run funny in Roland's world, so who knows what that actually looks like in terms of age. But my thought process is just extend that. You know, if you're gonna, you can make this journey look like it lasts 4 or 5 years. You know, again, because Roland's world, that's not even that hard. But you know, if the actor for Jake ages up a certain amount, I don't think that's something that you have to really worry about. Just make it seem like the journey is lasting longer than, you know, it does in the book. I don't think that really changes anything about the story necessarily. Let's see. And then the last one, of course, he has is Jake Chambers. In this one, he has Julian Hillard, which is he is young Luke from The Haunting of Hill House, as well as he's more recently been in the Marvel stuff. And he says, okay, I admit that I'm cheating a bit here because Julian Hillard has only been in one Mike Flanagan project and therefore can't necessarily be dubbed a regular. That being said, the pool of age-appropriate actors is small, and he also happens to be very much fit the bill. For a younger performer, he delivers a terrific turn as young Luke in The Haunting of Hill House, and he has further proven his skills with his turns in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in WandaVision and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, as well as The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. So I think my only concern there is I don't know how old he is, but I would wonder if you're going to allow for a couple years to happen before this comes to screen. I wonder if he would actually end up being too old for Jake by the time we get off the ground, I guess. I don't know. I'm not sure how old he is. It just feels like, okay, so he's 12 right now. So I guess, yeah, if you were to age Jake up a couple years, then, you know, if it takes a couple years to get this made, that you would just have to age Jake up a tiny bit for Julian. And not to mention that just because his actual age is what it is, of course, there's people that look younger or older. I mean, Aaron Paul was playing a 20-year-old Jesse Pinkman, 20-ish, in the 20s somewhere, when he was in his mid to upper 30s, but he looks younger, so he was able to play that younger character. So, Julian, I do think, has a look that is a little bit more younger, so I think even as he gets a little bit older until he really hits some sort of like puberty or growth spurt, he's probably still going to look a little bit younger than his years. It's always the joke I used to make back in high school is we would look at different kids that we went to high school with, and we talk about ones that will or won't have to be ID'd when they hit 21. There's just certain ones. It's like, oh my God. Like I remember, sadly, we had someone sad for him. We had someone in our high school that I think junior year, he was already had a pretty heavily receded hairline. I think he had halfway back on his head, receding hairline. That's pretty shitty to happen when you're only 16 years old or so. So someone like him, it's like he probably doesn't need to he probably will never get ID'd for buying booze. And there's other ones you look at where they're like, they're a senior, but they look like they should be in 7th grade because their age, the way they look age wise. And it's like, well, that guy's probably going to be being ID'd for alcohol until he's 50. So that's just the joke that we always used to have in high school. All right, so that is his list for who he wants to cast for the primary roles. Of course, he didn't go as deep into it as we did when we did ours. I think for ours, we also went out to some more of the lesser characters, not only because not necessarily because we wanted to cast those characters, but because there was Mike Flanagan actors that we wanted to plug in to different roles, and we found good roles for them. So, but he just did the nitty gritty, so I do appreciate that. I do find those kind of things fun. And I always love ones that take some risks because, I don't know, sometimes it's easy to just say, Patrick Stewart for Professor X. There's some ones that are just so obvious and easy, but it's the ones that are, a little bit more challenging, like casting some unknown Australian guy as Thor, or casting I don't remember if what's his name is Australian as well, or the other young unknown guy that they cast for Wolverine and X-Men in the year 2000. Like there's all these people that are a little bit riskier. They're either because they're unknown or whatever, and then they end up killing it. So there's all kinds of interesting elements of challenge, being a little more challenging with your picks, I guess. And I try to do that sometimes, but sometimes I do fall into like, oh man, this person would just be perfect for it. It's just an easy choice. Agamorphy says James Cameron is working around the problem of aging actors by filming Avengers Avatar 3 to 5 right now. Yeah, he's been filming all kinds of stuff all together for sure. I mean, it's easy for him when he can just take 10-15 years to make a sequel like he did for the Avatar 2, which I'm not talking shit because I love James Cameron. He is a massive part of my childhood, and while everyone before the second movie came out, people have been shitting on Avatar, and I just kept telling people, you guys are idiots if you do that, because one, Avatar 1 is not that bad, and two, there's all kinds of people that thought Avatar 2 wouldn't be relevant anymore because people wouldn't remember the first movie and it wouldn't do good box office. And I was one to continually say, man, if you bet against James Cameron, you're a damn fool. And if you want to make those bets, come my way because I'll take your action, because I would love to take your money from you if you're going to make dumb bets like that and bet against a legend like James Cameron. And then Carol says, if he wants it, I think he will get it. There's it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens. I'm really hoping. I was hoping we get some announcements here in the early 2024 for this Flanagan series because of the things he said back in the summer during the strike. I was kind of hoping that maybe right after the strike ended, we'd get some stuff going on. But we just haven't. But also this Eric Eisenberg article did mention the I think the life of Chuck being in post-production and stuff. I think that's something I didn't necessarily account for. So I am going to be hopeful, and we are just going to follow everything that we can until we get something solid. But I just want this Flanagan series so much. I want it deep in my bones. In the deepest elements of my bones, the desire for this series lives and screams out. So speaking of King adaptations, moving out of the into the wider Stephen King realm, we've got I guess some bad news. Seemingly at the time, Stephen King's From a Buick adaptation gets a disappointing update. This is from Patrick Kavanaugh from comicbook.com on January 3rd, 2024. So just to recap, originally this adaptation was announced in 2018, and then a year later, Thomas Jane joined the project in 2019. We actually covered it back then because there was some talk about how much he was owning it and how it would kind of put him into some rarefied era realm for Stephen King actors, because Jane has obviously done some stuff already, and so for him to kind of now be behind the camera as well as potentially being in front of the camera for this movie, it would put him into the realm where he was starting to get into like there's like a whole group where it's like people have been in one Stephen King movie, there's a shitload, but people have been in two, you narrow it down, then three, then four, and it just gets more and more narrow. And I think that with this one, it would put Thomas Jane into a much tighter window of people that have been in that many. So I remember covering that back when he joined, but then of course 2020 happened, and there was a twofold thing happened. First, there was the police brutality stuff that happened in 2020, and then we actually covered reports of the studios basically backburnering this, with this being kind of a police centered story. There was a concern that they weren't sure what the social feel would be for a movie centered around cops. I remember covering that in 2020, as well as, of course, COVID happened, which stopped everything for basically a year. And obviously not only completely stopped everything, but then also it took time, it seemed like, for everything to kind of chug back up, like get the engines going again. So that all happened, which basically was kind of where we left off. So recently Jane was on the Kingcast podcast. And he said on that podcast here, I got some direct quotes. He says, we had Jim Mickle, and in fact, the week we were supposed to go out and pitch it is when was when the world shut down. So we put that on hold, Jane revealed to the Kingcast. And he goes on and says, and then we started kind of creeping out of the pandemic, and I got Mark Fergus and Hawk Otsby, who wrote Children of Men and Iron Man 3. They also helped create The Expanse. So I brought them on board, and we were working on it. And then we had the rug pulled out from under us because Steven's agent had actually, without bothering to tell us, he'd informed us that our lease had lapsed. It was just because of the pandemic. Technically, the option had lapsed a long time ago, but because nobody was doing anything, so it was just a matter of miscommunication. He's not necessarily being the most clear in the way he's structuring his talking here. It feels like it's kind of hard to read a little bit. But essentially, yeah. So as they were coming out of the pandemic and wanted to work on it, they realized their rights had lapsed and they no longer own the rights from Stephen King, because they do, of course, if King only leases them out for a certain period of time, if nothing happens from that, they get pulled away. I believe that's how Mike Flanagan got the Dark Tower series, is whoever owned it, trying to pitch things out to Amazon and all that kind of stuff, would have been Glenn Mazzara probably. With nothing happening there, it eventually reverted back to King. He owned the rights again and was able to then sell or give them to Mike Flanagan, which of course there's a ticking clock as well, because I don't know how long the timeline is. It's always different, but at some point Flanagan could lose the rights to the Dark Tower as well. God forbid that happens, but it is a possibility, because what King and any author or anyone that owns video games or television or anything else, what they never want to do is they never want to give the rights out to someone who's then going to sit on them forever and never do anything with them. So there's usually some sort of time clock involved in there to stop them from just nesting on a right and never actually using it. So, one thing I want to point out, to be a little bit more optimistic, is this can happen and and it doesn't necessarily spell total doom for the project. I have not read From a Buick 8, but if you're excited about this, don't take some heart. I believe it was last year that we covered an interview with Mike Flanagan where he talked about, I think it was Gerald's Game, but one of the Stephen King things, and he was talking about how he had the rights, he couldn't land it with any studio, and then he actually lost the rights, and the rights went to someone else. But then when they couldn't get anything happen with it, they became available again, and he got the rights, and then made eventually with Netflix the I think it was Gerald's Game. So while this looks dead in terms of, especially for Thomas Jane, that doesn't necessarily mean that Jane might not still end up getting the rights back at a certain point in the future, and maybe then he has a better luck at getting it kind of on the ground and landed with a studio. So this is kind of normal, normal games for Hollywood. So this doesn't necessarily spell the absolute end to all things if you're From a Buick 8 fan, or just a Thomas Jane fan, or someone that just wants to see this project. Like the Flanagan thing is a good example where, if you would have been following Gerald's Game back in the day, not that you necessarily would have known Mike Flanagan the way we know him now, but if you were following it and you saw that he lost the rights, you may have just kind of thrown your hands up. But little would you have known that a number of years down the road, he'd get the rights back and end up making a wonderful and brilliant movie for Netflix. Then Stephen King's website describes the 2002 novel and says, quote, shortly after his father, a Pennsylvania state trooper, is killed in a senseless automobile accident, Ned Wilcox discovers that the members of the Troop D have a secret concealed behind their headquarters. Curtis Wilcox's friend and colleagues takes turns relating the 20-year history of the mysterious Buick Roadmaster locked up in Shed B, and how its discovery and unexplained behavior has captivated the tightly knit group of men for 2 decades. The Buick seems to be a conduit to another reality, and every now and then it breathes and inhales a little bit of this world, exhaling a little bit of whatever world it came from. So just a fun little synopsis for the From a Buick 8 story. This next one here might be a little bit heartbreaking because we still have no news, but we actually have some leaked set footage from the Salem's Lot movie. I just saved this from Twitter and then made a GIF out of it and put it on the slideshow. Hopefully it works for everyone here. So this is actually tweeted out by Lilia's Library, one of the better Stephen King news websites out there. So Lilia's Library tweeted it out on January 2nd, 2024. And yeah, this is just a little 10 something second thing. And it's a short video, a video that was taken on set of Salem's Lot, and it shows Ralph Glick rising from his grave and levitating. So in response to this tweet, someone said that it was actually taken by their friend who was a crew member on set, and has also shared some just set photos and stuff on different Stephen King Facebook and Twitter pages and stuff. So there is actually some credence that this is indeed a true behind the scenes video taken of the Salem's Lot movie. I believe probably what happened is he took this video and decided he was probably going to sit on it and not release it until long after the movie had come out. But probably at this point now, wondering if the movie will ever come out, he decided to release this. So very interesting, very creepy, of course. Mr. Little Boy Glick there coming out of his grave and levitating is a very sinister thing to see for sure. So I want this movie. I'm giving up a lot of hope on it. I hate to be negative, but I just kind of have a feeling that this has been Batgirled. I'm sorry, not Supergirl, Batgirled, and may have been taken off as a tax credit. I don't know, with so much radio silence now for a couple of years, I just have no hope that this is something we're going to ever see. But still kind of cool to see what could have been or what might be at some point in the future, is a scene of Ralph rising out of his grave, literally rising. Agamorphy says, Carol says, Tad, release the Snyder Cut. Yeah, indeed, release the Salem's Cut thing, for God's sake. Let's see this movie. I will say there's a lot of people that it always seems to come up every week, at least on like various Stephen King subreddits and different things. It seems like there's people that constantly post about this. So I do think there's an element out there that really want to see this movie. I just don't know when it'll actually be seen, if ever. So I hope I'm wrong on that, but I don't know. We'll see. It's still pretty cool to kind of see, because even as a behind the scenes footage, this actually looks kind of good in my mind. Okay. So the next one here, letting that play out the last time, we've got this one. This article is kind of an interesting one. Carol says that would be sad. I want to see that movie. One of King's best books. Indeed, I totally agree, and I cannot wait to see it if we do indeed see it. And I'm kind of mad at Warner Brothers for jerking us around on this for as long as they have, for basically having a movie that's entirely in the can, completely done, ready to go. There's literally no reason for them not to just drop it on HBO Max or something. If not, release it in theaters. I mean, if anything, just release it somewhere, for God's sake. I mean, put it out on fucking disc and let us buy the damn thing. I don't care. Just put it out there, for God's sake. So this one is an interesting one. It's the 7 most heartwarming moments from Stephen King. And this is, and I wanted to do this one. This is actually one that I originally had on the docket for the last episode of last year. And we didn't have time, so I ended up holding it over. So this is a 2023 article. But I thought this would be an interesting one because heartwarming, this is a little bit more positive. I felt like this is a fun way to start 2024 with something a little bit more positive. So this is from Jen Adams from Dread Central on a December 26, 2023, so the day after Christmas. So let's see here. Jen first talks about how King is, of course, the master of horror and has spent the last 50 years scaring the pants off of all of us. She mentioned that despite all of that, King is a very empathetic writer, and that his novels are so scary because they are relatable, and they hurt so much more because we can see ourselves in the characters that he has created. Essentially, she says his empathetic writing lays the groundwork for the horror, but at the same time, it gives us some truly touching moments. She gives some examples. For every ghost sitting behind a Plymouth Fury, there's 2 friends riding their bikes across an abandoned America, indulging in freshly picked apples. For every family annihilated in a Nevada police station, there's a father and son enjoying a Saturday afternoon and negotiating an allowance. So definitely some interesting little thoughts there. Yeah, where for every horrible thing, there is usually some sweet moment in the King stories. So she calls them beams of sunshine that cut through raging storms, and she wants to highlight some of them here. So the first one, for this one, I actually did not do slides. Maybe I should have, but individual slides. So the first one is The Shining. The Torrance family enjoys Thanksgiving. She says King's third novel is known for blending a harrowing portrait of addiction and abuse with one of the most terrifying haunted house stories ever written. Jack Torrance begins the winter as a caretaker for the Overlook Hotel with the intentions of finishing a play and mending his relationship with his wife and son. Unfortunately, the unquiet spirits that lurk within the hotel's hallways play on Jack's weaknesses and transform him into a murderous monster. And then she has a direct quote from the book here. Quote, it was November 29th, 3 days after Thanksgiving. The last week had been a good one. The Thanksgiving dinner, the best they'd ever had as a family. Wendy had cooked Dick Halloran's turkey to a turn, and they had all eaten to bursting without even coming close to demolishing the jolly bird. Jack had groaned that they would be eating turkey for the rest of the winter. Cream turkey, turkey sandwiches, turkey and noodles, turkey surprise. No, Wendy told him with a little smile, only until Christmas. Then we have the cap'n. I had to Google that. I've never heard that phrase or that term before. Somehow I've missed it even in the book. But apparently it's just a turkey of some kind. Or I'm sorry, not turkey, chicken, another poultry, another bird. And then it says Jack and Danny groaned together. So definitely a sweet little moment. And I will say, this is kind of one of those things where I kind of wish that at some point we'd get a Shining readaptation. That maybe it'd be a miniseries, because I think it'd be kind of cool to see the whole stretch of the winter and maybe actually get time to actually explore some of these innocent moments where maybe things seem okay or they could be okay. She says this brief moment of happiness makes Jack's recovery seem within reach, and we allow ourselves to believe that the Torrance family might just make it to spring after all. Unfortunately, the darker snows are waiting to fall, but the scene gives us a chance to spend some time with the Torrance family before the Overlook seizes them in its icy claw. So yeah, that's kind of, and it's interesting because it kind of changes the dichotomy of it, because when you do see that hope and that happiness a little bit, you can kind of see what the family could actually be, the potential almost, and it almost makes it more tragic when everything happens down the road, which goes to her point earlier, is why King is such a master of horror is because he's able to empathetically create some of these characters and give us just get us to love them and get us to feel for them before he does horrible things to them. Next up, Carrie. Mr. Hargensen tastes defeat. So she says Carrie White is not only one of King's most destructive characters, she's also one of the most tragic. The shy high school student spends her days dodging relentless bullying from her classmates and then goes home to an extremely religious abuse from her proselytizing mother. When Carrie gets her first period in the locker room after gym class, she has no idea what's happening to her body and honestly believes she is bleeding to death. Mean girl Chris Hargensen leads the other girls in taunting Carrie and pelting her with pads and tampons. The punishment for her cruelty turns out to be more than the selfish girl can bear, and she enlists the help of her powerful lawyer father. Hoping to get the tickets to prom reinstated, Mr. Hargensen squares off against the school's principal, Mr. Grail, who insists on holding Chris accountable for what she has done. And then we got a direct quote from the story. It says, and this is a quote out of the book. It says, "You apparently haven't realized all the implications of in loco parentis in this matter, Mr. Hargensen. The same umbrella that covers your daughter also covers Carrie White, and the minute you file for damages on the grounds of physical and verbal abuse, we will cross-file on those same grounds for Carrie White." Hargensen's mouth drops open and then closed. Grail smiles grimly and says, "I believe you know your way out, Mr. Hargensen. The sanction against your daughter stands." So, yeah, that is definitely a sweet moment, kind of a fist bump moment, I guess. Sweet in terms of like, sweet defeat for the dude that's trying to defend his shitty daughter and get her punishment revoked. So it's sweet in that way, not necessarily sweet in terms of happiness or whatever. In terms of like, oh, it's a touching moment, but it's kind of like a fist bump moment where you're like, fuck yeah, like to hell with Chris. I hope she doesn't go to prom. So then. Let's see, Jen goes on and says, the debut novel from Stephen King climaxes with a much more devastating prank and concludes with the small Maine town consumed in flames. Carrie will be blamed for the destruction, and King describes the graffiti throughout the town reading Carrie White burns in hell. However, this is one moment of support for a tragic girl, giving the reader some well-earned catharsis. Not only is Stephen King showing us that Carrie is a victim, but that there are actually people in the town who recognize her pain and are willing to stand up for her. Which I agree as well. We also get the one teacher that stands up for her as well. That's actually what I thought it would be when I first saw that Carrie was listed. I was like, oh, it'll be like the teacher that really kind of tries to take Carrie under her wing a little bit and protect her and stuff. But I guess that moment of kind of defeating the dad is pretty sweet too. Next up, The Dead Zone. Johnny and Sarah enjoy a picnic. It says she recaps, says, like Carrie before him, Johnny Smith endures more than his fair share of pain and sorrow. This high school teacher is enjoying his idyllic day at a local fair with his girlfriend Sarah when a car crash dramatically alters the course of his life. Having fallen into a coma, Johnny awakens 5 years later to learn that Sarah, along with the rest of the world, has moved on without him. He also developed an uncanny ability to see the future and dedicates his life to saving humanity from a hellish fate. But before he embarks on the dark road ahead, Johnny spends a quiet afternoon with Sarah, reclaiming a tiny bit of the life that they may have had together. And then the quote from the book, they talked of inconsequential things. There was no hurry. For the first time since he had come out of it, Johnny felt that the time was not his enemy. Time had provided them with a little air pocket in exchange for the main flow of which they had been robbed, and it would be here for as long as they needed it. And it is definitely kind of a sweet moment in the whole context of that book. It is kind of a moment of normality and him almost being able to relive what he ended up, not relive, but live what he lost. And it says, Johnny may have saved the world from nuclear war, but he gives up everything for his noble cause. The only consolation for this tragic hero is the fact that he gets to enjoy a bittersweet afternoon with the love of his life. Consummating a marriage that never was, we watch these two friends, old lovers, enjoying a brief moment of happiness, manufactured though it may be, before Johnny walks into the dead zone forever. So I do love that book. I do think I need to reread it, maybe this year. I remember that one just grabbed me by the throat. I don't think I was able to stop on that book. That's one of the books I really remember where it would I'd get home, driving home from work, and I'd sit in my car for 20 minutes listening to more. So yeah, that's a great one. Next one, Pet Sematary, Gage Flies a Kite. She goes on, says the Stephen King novel from 1983 may be the most frightening of his entire catalog, due to in large part to its powerful emotional punch. Lewis Creed is a young father who falls victim to the sinister power of death lurking in the woods behind his rural home. When his toddler son Gage dies in the road, Lewis rationalizes the unthinkable. He digs up Gage's body and buries him in a stony earth that lies beyond the pet cemetery. The thing that returns may look like his sweet little boy, but a demonic force lurks behind those innocent eyes. Shortly before this horror unfolds, Lewis enjoys a brief day of happiness with his doomed toddler. Father and son spend a warm afternoon flying a kite in the neighborhood field, just a few short weeks before the Creed family falls apart. And then the quotes again starts with a actual spoken word here. Gage flying kite, Gage said, as if asking not his father but himself for confirmation. He pulls the string experimentally. The kite nodded in the windy sky. Gage pulled the string harder. The kite swooped. Lewis and his son laughed together. Gage reached out his free hand, groping, and Lewis took it in his own. They stood there, stood together that way in the middle of Mrs. Vinton's field, looking up at the vulture. So yeah, definitely a sweet little moment, especially for what we all know what that damn story is about to do shortly after. She says in a bit of trademark foreshadowing, Stephen King describes this as the last good day of Lewis's life, which I will pause and say I'm glad that she points out that that's a trademark King foreshadowing, because we have talked many times over the years about how King is so good at that, where, you know, he'll be like, oh, and this is the last time they ever saw each other, or, you know, and this would be the last time, you know, King is so good at that, where it's like in the modern parlances where people are so like, you know, spoiler averse. You know, I just feel like in some way King is like the anti that, because there's times that he's basically spoiling his story as it goes, because, you know, we all know that King doesn't really consider like any twist of the plot to be like the most critical thing. For him, it's all about the journey, and the end is just a product of all that. It's not the be all end all of the story. So let's see. Going on. Considering what lies ahead, we can be grateful that this well-meaning father gets to enjoy this brief moment in which everything is right with the world before it is so cruelly ripped away. King's beautiful prose, combined with his devastating conclusion, reminds us to hug our loved ones a little bit closer and savor the moments of joy in our own lives before they slip away forever. So yes, a little bit of bittersweet to go along there as we all face our mortality because of the way that Jen wrote that. Thank you, Jen. Next one, The Stand. Tom and Stu go to the movies. She says part sci-fi apocalypse, part religious horror. The Stand is breathtaking in its scope and sprawl. The epic story follows a deadly plague that wipes out America's population, and the disparate survivors who try to find each other amidst the wreckage. As they gather in both Boulder and Las Vegas, Stephen King ultimately brings us to an all-consuming battle between good and evil. After the dust settles, two survivors once again find themselves far from home. Stu and Tom must battle their way across back to the Free Zone Committee and eventually hole up in an abandoned hotel to wait out a blizzard. To pass the time, Stu rigs up a projector, and the two friends spend the day enjoying their makeshift movie theater. And then the quote from the book: the generator began to chug cheerfully along. Stu shut the door as far as it would go to mute the engine sound and killed the lights. 5 minutes later, they were sitting side by side watching Sylvester Stallone kill hundreds of dope dealers in Rambo 4, The Firefight. Dolby sound blared out at them from the convention hall's 16 speakers, sometimes so loud it was hard to hear the dialogue, and then in parentheses what dialogue there was, but they had both loved it. So then Jen picks up and says, after losing nearly everyone and everything they've ever known, these two have finally found a brief moment of safety and peace. In the waning hours, this novel's full of death and destruction. They reminisce about the simple times of their former lives and enjoy a piece of the old world that will never be again. So that's a great one. When I first saw this headline, I in my mind, I kind of knew this next one. I knew 11/22/63 had to be in there, but I didn't know exactly which one she would pick. But she has 11/22/63, the Jody Jamboree. She says the 2011. I just got chills. This book is so fucking incredible, man. I would say of all of King's books that are not Dark Tower related, I want to say that 11/22/63 might be the one that really lives with me the most. The one that kind of just will randomly come back. Just elements of it will come back to me and stuff. And it's just such a beautiful story. So yeah, it's a great one. Let's see. Baraki says, two I would like to mention, if the list doesn't, the flight training scene at the very beginning of the Dome and the Green Mile when they take coffee to the movie. That's a good one. Those are good ones too, and neither of those are on here, but yeah, those are definitely good ones for sure. She says the 2011 novel from Stephen King about the Kennedy assassination is much more than a historical time travel adventure. When Jake Epping journeys back in time to stop Lee Harvey Oswald, he finds himself 5 years to kill before the titular day. Having adopted the name George, he spends his time teaching in Jody, Texas, where he falls in love with a beautiful librarian named Sadie. In lieu of a school play, the Lovebirds organize a variety show featuring skits and musical numbers from the students, faculty, and staff. After the moving rendition of the couple's trademark Lindy Hop, the evening ends with a massive cream pie fight that brings down the house. However, the show-stopping encore is an announcement that all proceeds will go to fund the reconstructive surgery of a student whose face was badly scarred in an accident earlier in the year. And then the quote from the book: "This was one night in a small town, one of those burgs off the main road that nobody cares about, much less that nobody cares about much, except for the people who live there, and that's okay because they care. Look at Bobby Jill sobbing in her hands. I looked at Bobby Jill sobbing in her hands. I looked at Sadie. There was cream in her hair. She smiled. So did I. She mouthed, 'I love you, George.' I mouthed back, 'I love you too.' That night, I loved all of them and myself for being with them. I never felt so alive or happy to be alive. How could I ever leave this behind?" So yeah, definitely some beautiful stuff. I knew it'd either be something like this or it would be the finale where he meets Sadie again, not being able to go back. He goes back and meets her as an older woman. I think that's a very beautiful scene too. So then, although that's a little bit more bitter than sweet. Then Jen says the novel opens with an exploration of the watershed moments and the discussion of JFK's death as a pivotal moment in American history. However, King's emotional novel argues that the moments like the pie fight, though much smaller in scale, are the ones that truly matter. They are the watershed moments that we cling to instead of obsessing over the past that we have no power to change. So very well picked out there. And then the last one here is Elevation. Scott Carey rises. She says, in the reverse of his usual MO with Elevation, Stephen King takes a simple but horrific idea, rings out the joy rather than the terror. Scott Carey is living alone when he notices an anomaly on his bathroom scale. Every day, Scott loses a little bit of weight, regardless of what he does or how much he eats. No physical change can be seen, but Scott finds it increasingly difficult to remain earthbound and eventually decides to let himself rise up among the stars. And then the quote from the book: Now he caught escaping heat from the house, a thermal, and began rising faster. The town disclosed itself as if from a drone or low-flying plane. The street lamps along Main Street in Castleview like pearls on a string. He could see the Christmas tree that Deirdre had lit over a month ago and which would remain in the town square until the 1st of February. It was cold up here, much colder than the ground, but it was all right. He could let the coverlet go and watch it drop, spread out as it went. Slowing, becoming a parachute, not weightless, but almost. Everyone should have this, he thought, and perhaps at the end, everyone does. Perhaps in their dying, everyone rises. And then Jen picks up here and says, this brief novella from Stephen King is a beautiful treatise on chronic illness and death and the act of letting go. As Scott faces the end of his life, he focuses on honoring his personal relationships and thinking about the legacy he will leave behind. Though Scott's conditions may be vague, his experiences of rising into the sky like a carefree balloon is a beautiful recreation of a journey we will all face one day. Hopefully, when our time comes, we will find the courage to rise as well. So that's all she has, but I did want to talk just as not really even a tangent, but I wanted to tie it into the Dark Tower. Everyone in the chat, what are some of the heartwarming moments in the Dark Tower series that, not necessarily we have to make a full list, but like because in my mind, when I clicked on this list too, I wondered, is there going to be anything Dark Tower wise in here? And of course there's not, it seems like, but it made me wonder, like, what are some Dark Tower moments, that are kind of heartwarming moments? What do you guys think? For me, I definitely, well, the one that immediately comes to mind for me, is, I guess it would be Eddie, toward the end there when, Eddie is kind of, giving Roland his, not respect, but, when Eddie calls Roland father, And I don't know, it just kind of feels like it isn't a goodbye, but it kind of feels like in the larger scale of the story, kind of the goodbye, where, you know, they're all kind of laying stuff on the line for Roland there as the journey's coming toward an end. You know, and I don't know, just because Eddie was always so butting heads with Roland, that for him to finally just kind of like, you know, he thanks Roland too. I'm getting chills thinking about it, because he thanks Roland. He's like, thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for allowing, you know, helping me come out of what I was to be what I am, you know. And he of course calls him father, which again just gives me chills, because it's yeah. It's one thing for Jake that is a little bit more, you know, father and son figure, but for Eddie, that's always felt like the younger brother that's always, you know, not, you know, kind of backbiting and questioning Roland at every turn, for him to finally just kind of like call him father and thank him for, you know, his chance at redemption, is one that immediately came to mind. Carol says Roland hugs Jake for the first time. Yeah, after the drawing, and then the you know, will you ever let me drop again? He says no, never again. That's a great one for sure. Baraki says Roland dancing the Kamala. That's a really good one too. One of my favorite just smaller scenes in the entire series probably, because it just, and you're right, Baraki, because I think that one really feels kind of like some of these that she pointed out in this article. You know, there's some of these where it's like this larger thing going on, usually negative, but then it's like in the midst of it all, you've got this ray of sunshine cutting through this storm, and you've got this whatever. And I think that's kind of what that feels like there. It's like in the midst of this story where there's a lot of death, betrayal, there's horrible things happening, and Roland is a broken man from a long gone world. So that, I don't know, there's just a part of me that always felt like when I was reading that we're able to see probably a Roland that could have been, you know, had Susanna not died, or Susan had not died, and he had actually just settled down and married, you know, her, and raised a family, and maybe even forsaken the gunslinger way to be with his family, instead of, you know, go and die in a foreign land, chasing a tower. You know, it almost feels like that. It feels like almost like a what if, like this is maybe what Roland may have looked like, just kind of in, you know, kind of the, almost in my mind I think of like The Stand, like you hear about Mother Abigail in the Grange Hall, right, when everyone has their performances and it's just this communal gathering, and I think that's the way it is with the Kala as well, and just to see Roland let down his mystique of what we've generally seen him as, and just, you know, dance the Kamala. It's something else to see for sure. But yeah, it was definitely one that I was wondering if she would mention Dark Tower, but I was kind of trying to think of some of the moments, you know, maybe Benny Slightman Jr. and Jake jumping into the hay, kind of a small moment, but kind of an interesting one too, especially with Jake's trauma, you know, that has happened throughout the whole journey, basically, since we meet Jake from the word go. There's nothing but trauma and bad things happen to the kids. So, and then of course he's becoming a gunslinger, so he's kind of having to like forsake childhood and, you know, kind of do a little bit more, you know, adult things. So then to allow him to just then be a kid, and not just that, that's like the one moment that speaks for the larger, but, you know, just to be with Benny, having the sleepovers, there's all this stuff with that where it's just Jake's able to kind of be a kid. You know, even if certain times he's kind of pretending that he's doing gunslinger things, ultimately, you know, Roland and Eddie and them see right through it, where it's like Jake just wants to be a kid even for a short time. So yeah, there's definitely some of those wonderful moments in the Dark Tower series as well. So yeah, I wanted to mention those as well as what Jen mentioned here. Let's see. Let me get the. Sorry, I'm trying to find the next slide here. I'm actually gonna. All right, yeah. So next one is odds and ends. I had one other one that I was maybe gonna cover, but I think I'm just gonna dive into the odds and ends and then get to the Palaver section. Just because I think I think it'll work out better. The other one we'll see if we do it later on or not. It's kind of one that isn't necessarily as critical to cover. But so let's go ahead over to odds and ends. Get down to my notes. The first one is David Cronenberg's The Dead Zone. We just referred to the book The Dead Zone, is now available to stream on Amazon Prime. I don't know if Amazon Prime is the same everywhere worldwide, but at least in the United States, and if you are international, go ahead and check Amazon Prime if you've got it, because The Dead Zone is a great movie by a great filmmaker covering a great Stephen King story, and it is now available to stream over there at Amazon Prime. If you've never seen it, it's pretty great. Good, it's good to watch. Next up, the Mick Garris's The Shining miniseries is getting its Blu-ray upgrade from Scream Factory. This is actually one that I never thought would happen. It just seems like I own this on DVD, and I just didn't ever think we'd ever see it get remastered on Blu-ray or 4K or anything. Just because largely, I wouldn't say it's completely forgotten, but I don't think it's anywhere near as is in the cultural zeitgeist, so I never thought we'd get this. So I'm really excited that this will be coming on Blu-ray. Scream Factory usually does a really great job about having special features and stuff. There's no word on that yet, but they always do a great job over there, so I'll look forward to more details as that comes down the pike. Also, last episode we covered the Scream Factory is also doing the thinner release for Scream Factory on Blu-ray. But one thing that I missed, I don't know if it wasn't out yet, though these details hadn't come out yet, but they are out now, or they were out and I missed them. But Joe Mantegna, the star of the movie Thinner, has previously recorded a commentary for this film with the film's director Tom Holland, he also directed Fright Night and Child's Play. Despite that, Joe has actually recorded a whole new commentary track for Scream Factory for this release alone. So we've got a brand new commentary track from Joe Mantegna, as well as he'll be joined by Mitchell Gallen, which is the film's producer. So that's kind of a cool thing. It's hard sometimes, and nowadays it seems like it's a dying thing where they have commentaries on stuff. So it'll be pretty cool to see what that looks like. So that's coming out from Scream Factory as well. And then next up, we got a really cool Reddit post. Someone on Reddit posted this. They bought a copy of The Shining for $1.99 and opened it up to find not only that it was signed by Stephen King, but there was actually a picture taken of King signing the book. So I would say that that's a purchase of a lifetime for $1.99 at a thrift store. So got a picture of it on the screen here. I'll have it in the show notes if you're listening on the podcast side. But yeah, Stephen King, signed version of, I think the signature actually says, if I remember right, it says the year, the signature or the date of when it was done as well. So that's pretty cool. It's kind of one of those things you always kind of dream about when you buy something on eBay or at a thrift store or whatever. You might find something truly remarkable. I mean, not everyone's going to buy a Rembrandt painting at a garage sale for $10 that turns out to be $1 million painting. But finding a signed copy of The Shining from Stephen King with a picture of him signing it is pretty damn cool. Okay, so the last one in the odds and ends here is an interesting one. We have an awesome reimagined book cover of The Shining. This is created by Readful Things, and it is, of course, a spoof on the iconic cover of The Stand, but it is redone to where instead of the two life and death ghoul things dueling, it is Jack and Wendy, Wendy with a bat, Jack with the axe, dueling it out for the fate of humanity or whatever, as it was with The Stand. So it's kind of a cool thing. Of course, it's the Kubrick Wendy and Jack, but it is really kind of a cool art creation there. So Readful Things, props to them for creating this wonderful thing. Last time I know we covered that Hallmark movie Shining thing. I don't think it's going to be a regular thing where we have fan art for The Shining, but 2 in a row, that's kind of fun. Next up, we have Uncle Stevie Recommends. He tweeted out, he hasn't tweeted a ton over the holidays, but he did tweet this one. He said, The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. He says, a short read, but well worth your time. It's nasty, it's fun, and it has more twist than a corkscrew. I really enjoyed it, he says. And I just, in my mind, when he says it's nasty, for someone like Stephen King to say that makes me wonder what the hell this book has in it. So this is a literary one. I haven't necessarily seen any tweets since the last episode of King talking about anything that he's watched. I know there's not as much out there new to watch right now, with the strikes so freshly resolved, as well as the holidays. Not a lot of stuff really gets played over the holidays. Even traditional TV always took a break during Christmas because who the hell is staying home and watching TV? Usually people are out traveling and seeing their families and stuff for the holidays. So that's the Uncle Stevie Recommends for the year. And also, I guess I did want to mention too, about like just not having any news on the Dark Tower. I know we mentioned those couple articles earlier that, you know, we don't know when we're going to hear anything from Flanagan. But I will say I've even seen some stuff on social media. I meant to say this back when we were talking about that, but I've just remembered it now. But I do know that, you know, I've generally heard that Hollywood pretty much ends from Thanksgiving until like February, because you've got the holidays that everyone's off for Thanksgiving, and then Christmas and Hanukkah and all that kind of stuff. But then after that, you've got movie season where you've got like Sundance, all that stuff, kind of stuff where people are traveling here to Utah for Sundance or different festivals. It doesn't seem like they all get back to their offices and start doing work until February. And I actually, just as anecdotal evidence to that, I've seen some, because I follow a lot of writers and stuff on Twitter, screenwriters, and there's been a number of them saying like, hey, since the strike ended, there is just no work. Everyone thought the work would just start right back up after the strikes, and it just simply hasn't. Like, there's a lot of people saying like, I need a job. Like, this isn't great right now. Like, nobody's taking meetings right now. They're not starting new projects. Like, and I think it's probably just that off season that's happening right now. So just take heart that we don't have any any news for the Dark Tower series. Doesn't mean that it's not happening. There's honestly, it sounds like from what I'm seeing, there's not a lot happening at all anywhere. So let's go on over to the Palaver section. So the first thing I wanted to mention is the March Insanity. So we did end up picking the topic. I think we announced that on the last episode. So the topic we're doing this year is worst Dark Tower moment. So we've done the best Dark Tower moment. We've done the, fan favorite, like basically Dark Tower Palaver's favorite character, which ended up being won by one vote by Eddie Dean over Oi. Then we had the most hated character, which is Rhea, that won handily over Cordelia Delgado. So just to kind of balance out that we did the best moment, we are now going to do the worst moment. So I have already thrown this out, but I want to remind everyone I need nominations. Send those in for basically another month and 3 days. February 23rd, that'll be the day before the last episode of February. And remember, I guess that reminds me, I completely forgot about that as well. We got this episode, we got next week I got a book club, and then 2 weeks after that is the next episode, is the first one of February. That one's actually going to be a book club, so we're going to have a back-to-back book club episode, because I want that February 23rd episode to be, or 24th episode, I want that one to be a round table to where we can unveil what the bracket's going to be, show everyone, and then know that, come March 1st we'll have the vote started. I still need to figure out exactly where the voting's going to happen. I've already done a little bit of research into that, but I'm going to find a place that is not as annoying as the last year's, where it made you do the whole CAPTCHA bullshit for every vote. That was really annoying. I apologize, I didn't see that. It was this weird thing where the website seemed legit. Like if someone had to like sign up, like I don't know if they had to sign up or use their email or something. There was something where it just took out the complete anonymity of it a little bit. With that, it didn't require CAPTCHAs every time. But I didn't want people to have to do that, and it didn't tell me up front that if I didn't make people do that, that it would make you do CAPTCHAs every time. So I didn't realize that till after the vote had already started. So this year I'm going to find one that will be a little bit less painful and annoying to do. So yes, just know this episode, a week from now, a book club, 2 weeks from then, a book club, and then 2 weeks after that we will have roundtable number 147, or what are we on, 140? Oh, you know what, sorry, I also forgot to take the call Skype thing off this slide. I took it off all the others, but I completely forgot on this one. Don't call Skype, because there is no Skype. I don't have it even turned on right now. But yeah, so March Insanity, we will unveil the bracket on the February 24th roundtable. So send it in on social media, send it in on emails. Because basically, and don't be concerned if you see it like on social media, other people mention the one you want. Please send me your stuff, because basically the way that we vet out who makes the top 16 that gets into the bracket is going to be the ones that are mentioned the most. So if there's one that gets mentioned 16 times, I know I'm looking at the number 16 right now, but let's say 16 people nominate one thing, and then one person nominates another, and then everyone else sees that and goes, oh, he already nominated, I don't need to. That one may not even make the bracket because only one person nominated it. So that's kind of how there's almost a vote within a vote to make the 16. So send them in, show at darktowerpalaver.com, comment here in the YouTube side, your nominations. I will come in and check here. Hit us up on Twitter, hit us up on Instagram, hit us up on email, Facebook, everywhere there is. Shoot me your nominations. What is your worst Dark Tower moments? And I will get that Sweet 16 dialed in, and we'll be ready for March 1st. Can't wait for that. Next up, I wanted to talk a tiny bit about Blaze. So I actually was, so I think I told everyone I read, God, God, what did I started with The Running Man, because we covered the news on The Running Man still being in development with Edgar Wright. So I read that, and then I was just kind of in a mood where I was like, you know what, fuck this, I'm just going to go and read Roadwork next, another Bachman book. I really enjoyed that one too. It was a lot different, but I actually enjoyed the hell out of it. And then so when I got done with that, I was like, you know what, what's next? Look down the list, and lo and behold, in the last 10-15 years, Blaze came out, also under the Richard Bachman name, which is interesting because that's so far removed from his exposure as Richard Bachman. But I also picked this one because the other one is The Regulators, and God, what's the name of the other book? He did the two back to back where one was King, one was Bachman. It's the same characters or same whatever, but it's written differently. Let's see. Let me see if I can find the damn thing. Thinner, Running Man, The Regulators, and Desperation. That's so the Desperation was Stephen King. The Regulators was Richard Bachman. So there's that one. But that one I felt like I'm going to have to actually read the Desperation as well as the Regulators because they kind of go hand in hand. So I skipped those ones and went down to Blaze. So all I have left to go read is the Regulators, and then I have to go and find my PDF somewhere on my computer of Rage because that one's out of print because I need to read that one as well. But I've been kind of hitting the Bachman stuff. I will say, I don't know if I've heard negative just throughout in the ethos and the ether out there, if I've heard negative about Blaze, but I feel like I kind of went into Blaze expecting not to like it as much. But honestly, I think I really love Blaze. I mean, I know I really love Blaze a lot, and I may have actually liked it more than even some of the other Bachman stuff I just read recently. I really enjoyed Blaze. I felt like it was a wonderful story. I mean, it was terrible, the things that were happening in it, of course, but it was just a very, very interesting story, and it just held me and compelled me. I really enjoyed it. Let me pause that real quick to say, Baraki says, how are we defining worse? Like moments we liked least, I suppose. Yeah, exactly. So the opposite of we did the best moments. And it was things like, Roland saying fuck you to Blaine, or what were some of the other nominations we had? I'm blanking. Probably Roland dancing the Kamala may have been on there. There's all this kind of so it's kind of the opposite of that. What are the moments that you just and even maybe it's ones on rereads that you just cringe and you just don't want to get to? I'm assuming some of the nominations might be things like Susan getting burned, Oi being killed. Like there's just some of those moments that we all absolutely hate. There may be even moments that we slow down reading because we know they're coming up because we just hate them. And it could be for any number of reasons. It could be because it's sad. It could be because it makes you angry. It could be for any reason at all, but just moments you just don't like they're just not, and not because, and I guess that's what I'm trying to be clear with people too, is I don't want it to come off like, I guess I want it to be more as in universe as possible. I don't want it necessarily to be things like, oh, when Stephen King wrote himself into the story, or like, I don't know, just I guess not meta is what I'm looking for. Let's look for stuff in universe. What are the moments in the Dark Tower story that we just hate? Like, not necessarily because they're, we don't like the choices that were made, like by King. Like, oh, well, I don't really like that he put himself in the story. More like, I don't know, Jake dying. I mean, there's all kinds of, there's 100 of these moments that we all just, whether it be big or small, that we hate. And that's kind of what I'm thinking is with worst moment is it's kind of just the mirror image of our best moments, kind of the times where you're throwing your hands up in the air like, fuck yeah, like Roland, told Blaine off, or, oh, Eddie killed Blaine. Like there's all these moments you just adore. And now this is the opposite side where it's just like you kind of want to hold your hand in front of your face and not read because the moments are not wonderful. Okay, so yeah, and then just a Blaze. So is it Of Mice and Men? I think the classic story, and that's what Blaze reminded me of. You kind of have like the more simple-minded one, but then in this story, they're criminals, but the smarter one that like helps them out a lot ends up dying. So basically the whole story is this criminal caper, but you've only got the more simple-minded guy. And so you just kind of like cringe. You kind of feel bad for him a bit, even though he's a bad person doing bad things and stuff. But it was I just love this story for some reason, and I really did not expect to. When I went into it, after I read Running Man, I really enjoyed it. I was like, dude, this was good. I read Roadwork, and actually, surprisingly enough to me, I think I may have liked Roadwork a little bit better than Running Man, which is exactly the opposite of what I would have expected. And then it was all like a double element where it's like, then I got to Blaze, and I'm like, oh, there's no way I'm going to like this anywhere near as much as these last two, which is those ones or whatever. And this one, and again, I don't know if it was something I've just caught from people saying they don't like it and assuming it wasn't as good, or if there was just something about me that It could even be me, because I remember at one point I was like thinking Blaze, like, oh, that'll be like maybe a Firestarter or Supernatural something or other. And then when I read that it was like just like a crime story, I think I even kind of like rolled my eyes and went, nah, don't want that one then. So it's probably even that. But so I just had a negative aspect going into it. But when I actually read it, it was just like, dude, this story was awesome. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I just wanted to chime in on that one. I don't necessarily keep you guys up to date and give my reactions on everything I read, but I did want to kind of tick those boxes, and I did do that on the extended content count. So my count, I am currently at 72% of Stephen King's books read. I have read 54 out of 75. And then a number of months from now, You Like It Darker is coming out May 21st, 2024. That 75 will turn to 76, and all of our percentages will go down a little bit. And then I also I have not touched them yet, but I also, ones that did not have audiobooks, I bought some Kindle versions of Cycle of a Werewolf and Night Shift, two that I've really, really wanted to read, but without audiobooks, it just gets harder to actually get around to getting them. So I decided, you know what, fuck it, pull the trigger on the Kindle. I can read it on my phone when I'm out and about. I have my Kindle, whatever. So I got those two that are coming down the pike at some point. Let's see. Baraki says moments where we think, oh no, not this scene. This is so hard to read because of feelings. Yeah, that kind of thing. Exactly. It could be that. It could be because of feelings. It could just be because you just absolutely fucking hate like Cordelia Delgado. It could be a scene where it's, her, not even necessarily like her whole part in the Charyu tree. It could just be a moment of just whatever, like just because you fucking loathe like what she's doing to Susan. It could be any number of things. I guess I'm trying to make sure that people think it doesn't necessarily have to be saddest moment. It could be something you're not into the moment for another reason. It could be another negative emotion like anger or whatever else. Like it just for some reason you're just like, God damn it, I don't want to read this right now. Like I know for me, like as everyone starts to die, Eddie dying is the first one, and then Jake, and then Oi, and then like on and on and on. Like that whole section, like that's just a number of them in a row. And I know for me, when I start reading book 7, I start to slow way down because I know those moments are coming, and I just do not want to get to them. So those could be that. Or I mean, for me, another one just off the top of my head, Eddie putting the knife to Roland's throat. That one for me is anger. Just wanted to grab Eddie by the freaking collarbones and shake him until collarbones break, maybe, because I'm just so angry at him for letting his addictive junkie personality put my boy Roland at risk. Could be things like that. It could be any number of things. And then Baraki also says Cycle is really cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. As well as Night Shift. I mean, Night Shift is the most prolific Stephen King short story thing of all time. I can't remember how many are in there, but I want to say it's somewhere in the over 50% of the stories and that's a big one. That's got multiples. That's got like 15 to 20 short stories, not like a short one like If It Bleeds. It had 4 stories in it. And I want to say that something over 50% of the stories in Night Shift have been adapted to movies or shows or something. So it is one of the more prolific short story ones. I really am shocked because I think it's King's most famous short story collection as well. So I'm really shocked that whoever it is, if it's Penguin Audio or Simon & Schuster, whoever the hell it is that owns Night Shift, the fact that they haven't got a hardcore star-studded audiobook for Night Shift made kind of, I mean, in the last number of years, we've seen a number of books recorded new, either re-recorded with a new artist or recorded for the first time. I'm just surprised that Night Shift has remained untapped in the audiobook market, as well as Cycle the Werewolf. So I'm really excited to read those two. Right now I'm taking a tiny break from fiction. I'm reading some nonfiction stuff currently. And then once I get done with that, I'll probably be back in and jumping into one of those. Although now that I think about it, with all the Richard Bachman stuff I've read, I probably allowed to do a reread. My general rule is I like to do 2 new fresh reads of things I've never read before I allow myself to do any rereads. And since my Dark Tower reread, I've read 3 Richard Bachman novels, so I am probably good to do a reread if I wanted to. I'll have to consider that potentially. So that is all that discussion, and then I do have the update from Peter. That'll be the last thing, and then we'll hit the outro stuff and sign off. So Peter sent me a document. He hit me up the other day and said, "Hey, when are you recording?" I said, "Actually, because of an illness, I'm recording on Saturday, which is today." And he says, "Awesome." He's like, "I was listening to the year-end bash wanted to send in an update because I heard people asking and stuff. So I think what the idea here too is he just has his document shared with me, and then just every so often he'll update it with some new updates. So we'll have kind of Peter checking in with us every so often. So that's awesome. So he starts off saying, "Hi all." He says, writing this on 1/15/2024. He says, I've been very busy with work. The post office loves to work the new people more than the old timers. He says, because we are cheaper. I did get my own route last week, so I'm settling into it and getting used to it. But with the post office this time of year, weather is slowing all of us down. Tad can attest it has been snowing a lot recently here in Utah. Yeah, it's so weird. I'm going to pause him to just chime in. Yeah, we went all of December with almost no snow, and then right toward the tail end of December, and then all the way through the last 3 weeks or so, we've just been getting hit like crazy, just snow constantly. It's weird because December was so damn dry, but it's been making up for it. Then he goes on and says, it takes me until 7 to 9 o'clock each night to get off. So I come home, shower, eat, and go to bed. I only get 1 day off a week, which I have been using to catch up on rest. Overall, I'm doing good. Just got to get through the next 4 to 6 months until I can become a regular, then hopefully get more than 1 day off a week. Getting more than 1 day off a week should happen. He says, I started listening to books again using Audible while delivering. It makes the hours go by much faster. So far, I've listened to 12 novels since mid-December, the 3 Hunger Games books, the 3 Hannibal Lecter novels, The Talisman, The Black House, which are rereads, I know that, Watchers, Bind, Torture, Kill, the BTK story, It, and Salem's Lot. So not just a shitload of books, but he's got some long ones in there. So then he says, miss you all and hope you all had a wonderful holiday season. I will keep sending Tad these updates if anything changes. And then he signs off by saying, long days and pleasant nights, signed Peter. So thank you, Peter, for sending that, getting a good update from him there. And yes, definitely, Brocky says in the chat, thank you for the Peter update. We miss him. Indeed, I do as well, because his schedule is so crazy. Not only not recording, but I mean, for one, and also there's not a lot of movies coming out. But even if there was, I don't think we'd be able to like hang out as much because his job is pretty crazy at the moment. So I miss him as well. And yeah, definitely be good to hear some occasional updates from him. Hopefully, if he's listening, he can get all of the unchecked flag love that we're throwing out there with all of our love of Randall Flagg, the hero of the Dark Tower series and the Stand and every story he's in, right? And you know, because now that I'm completely unchecked, he's not here to argue with me or challenge me. It's wonderful, you know. It's suddenly to not have anybody to oppose my viewpoints. So hopefully he's listening and grating his teeth right now as he's listening to this whatever mail route he's on. Listening to this, just kind of probably talking out loud to me, even though I can't hear him arguing with me. So that's awesome. Good to hear an update from Peter. So yeah, that will do it for this episode. Like I said, I'll hit the outro stuff here, but then remember, a week from today, I'll be back for episode 1, book club. I don't think I've even updated my little counter list, so I can't pull it up, but I think it's episode 7 for Wizard and Glass next week, and then 2 weeks from then we have the next book clubs. We'll have a block of those, and then late February we'll have another roundtable, and we'll announce our March Insanity 2024 bracket. Very excited for that. Can't wait to see what is our worst Dark Tower moment according to Dark Tower Palaver viewers and listeners. So the outro stuff, if you want to subscribe to us on any podcasting service of your choice, you could do that. You can stream us on Spotify. You can hit us up on Audible or Amazon Music. You can join us for the live streams here at youtube.com/darktowerpalaver. If you are here on YouTube, if you want to ring the bell for notifications, subscribe, of course, and then like the video. Gotta love that. As well as if you're watching in the future and you're not here with us live in the chat, you can also leave comments on the video, because this is a live stream as of right now, but once I'm done with this and hit end, it turns into just a straight YouTube video. Throw comments in there too. I try to check up on those as well. I'll respond if I need to or can. Sometimes it's just like just chiming in to say, hey, what's up, or great video, whatever it is. I appreciate them all, but you could always hit us up that way too. I always kind of forget about the YouTube comments, but they are a way to respond to the show if you want. Also, send in those nominations. You can find the show notes over at darktowerpalaver.com. All the show notes for this episode, as well as all things Dark Tower Palaver link-wise, are linked over there. If you want to support the show, you can do that at Patreon at patreon.com/darktowerpalaver. Again, what would it be? 6 days from now, it'll be the Patreon hangout for 2024. We'll be starting off. We'll be on the 26th of January. It's a Friday. We'll do it in the afternoon. And then I'll have Geekery Abides later on that evening. And then, that is Patreon. And then if you want to contact the show, do it at darktowerpalaver.com. Hit us up on Facebook, facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. At Twitter, or on Twitter, it's at darktowerpod. It is Dark Tower Palaver, all one word, on Instagram. Any of those places, give us a like, throw us a comment, throw your nominations out on any of those places if you want. And we will get that March Insanity ready to go. I will see you all in 1 week as we go dive in deeper into this backstory of Roland, into this, we're now hearing his story. We're full on in it. We have now met Susan. Susan and Roland have now met on the road. We need to figure out what's going to happen next. I can't wait to unravel this book as this nice new year, fresh year starts, because it's my favorite book of the series, and I can't wait to just dig into it and get into all the wonderful aspects of this story. I do 100%. I mean, I know for a fact we will this year be getting to the showdown at the Traveler's Rest, which is another one of our best Dark Tower moments. Can't wait to get to that, as well as all the other fun stuff in this story. Of course, there's dark things coming down the road too, although that probably won't be this year. That'll be a little bit further down the road before we get to all the nitty gritty of this story. But can't wait for that next week. Join us there. And then, of course, I'll sign off as I always do by saying long days and pleasant nights.
Boy.
All right, everyone in the chat, thank you all for joining and being part of the conversation. Carol says Audible is awesome. Again, Rocky said thank you for Peter update. Miss him. Yes, thank you all for joining. Thanks for being part of the conversation. It's always great. Love having y'all here. Whether it's filling in the gaps like Alan did, telling me Bill Skarsgård, which is leaving my mind, or whether it's giving me your responses to what we're covering or whatever else. I love it. Love having y'all part of it, and love. Can't wait for 2024. I'm excited for it. It feels crazy that we're already like 20 days into January, especially because I know this show got delayed. So this actually should have been a week ago. But I mean, we're already most of the way through January, which is freaking insane. But I am excited for this year. It'll be a fun year, a good year. Hopefully, a lot of good news coming down the pike is my hope. So, see you guys all in 1 week for Dark Tower Palaver. And if you join Geekery Abides 6 days from now, check the YouTube over there for that live stream. That'll be Friday night. See you guys then.